What does an avoidant partner gain from the experience of being in a relationship? Was the experience worth the cost? Do they even realize how much it costs their partner? Okay, so this is in response to the video I did, what does the avoidant partner get out of a relationship? Well, so, an avoidant partner, like any other person who's struggling with insecure attachment, they are, hi Katora, they are wanting some connection, right? They are also wanting that feeling of being connected to someone and being in love. And oftentimes someone who's avoidant, or what I call a rolling stone, will have disconnected themselves from that loving feeling for whatever reason. And the reason is usually because it was unsafe, typically in their past, and or there may be some things that are reminding them of that in their present. And individuals that have avoidant attachment, they've erected what are often rigid but fragile boundaries. So when you have something that's very rigid and not flexible at all, if there's enough pressure and or force, it will actually fall over pretty easily, and or it'll be brittle and it may crack very easily. So you'll notice that similarly to open hearts or individuals that have anxious attachment, the rolling stone also has that experience of being all in and then of being all out. And I would add to this that rolling stones can also be very romantic as well. They can also have kind of unrealistic romantic expectations, because in their experience, they too have created this sort of symbol in their minds, or this sort of fantasy in their minds of the one that is going to swoop in and save them from their isolation. Now, this fantasy, this symbol of the perfect partner, provided a service at one time. It saved them at one time. It was the place of escape. It was the place of solace. It was the thing that allowed them to keep going when in their own circumstance they weren't getting the connectedness. So you have to create these images in our minds of the things that we desire and that we want and that would make us feel connected in order to tolerate whatever our current experience of connection may be. And if that current experience led us towards, in this example, a state of avoidance or of needing to cut ourselves off from those feelings, then we generate an attachment to that fantasy. So it serves us. We have to respect that as having served us at one time. But what happens is it also serves to keep us separate from whatever the current experience of connection may be, because in this person's experience, the current experience was unpleasant, or it was even a threat to their emotional, mental survival, right? So now we are in adulthood, and whatever the circumstance was in childhood that led to that mechanism is hopefully no longer present, although usually we tend to recreate it because that's what we understand about love, right? But let's say you're in an adult situation and you find yourself in a relationship where that aspect, that mechanism that we have used for so long to protect ourselves emotionally, let's say that's being challenged because you've met someone who stimulates the warm, loving, intimate feelings, the part of you that does desire connectedness. Well, so now that mechanism is going to turn on because it's flashing a red light, like warning, warning, warning. We're stepping into that area that was dangerous and unsafe. And so then the fantasy of the perfect one or the one kind of floats up into their head. And a couple of things happen. They can ascribe that fantasy to their partner, so they kind of hand it over to them. And oftentimes open hearts will sense that. They will feel that. They will feel that being handed over to them. And because open hearts are so, maybe the word's hypervigilant, but that they are so hyper aware of and sensitive to the desires of the person around them, they kind of take it in. And this is where you start to feel the open heart stepping into a more performative role. This is where the people pleasing comes in. This is when they try to figure out and take on, what would my partner want right now? What would make my partner enthralled with me in this moment? What does my partner want to hear? And they try to suss that out before they act. And so on both parts, what happens is this sort of illusion gets created in the relationship, and both partners are really enamored with it. And then usually it's about 3 to 4 months into the relationship that isn't really sustainable anymore. And so now there's this real connection that has to be dealt with. The open heart has to be challenged to really express who and what they are, and to know who and what they are, so that they can show up more authentically in the relationship. And then the rolling stone has to let go of this. They both kind of do, but they have to let go of this fantasy, this infatuation, to be able to step into understanding that there are boundaries between you, and that the boundaries are not a severance of the connection. The boundaries are actually what is going to inform that connection, create a sense of authenticity between you. But oftentimes, because we've experienced boundaries as either being really rigid and rejecting, or we've experienced them as too expansive and invasive, we view boundaries as being kind of like the enemy. And so the response of the rolling stone is to throw them up quite solidly and quite rigidly, because their experience of boundaries are that they are invasive. And for the open heart, they experience that as a rejection, because their experience of boundaries are that connection means a complete merger into someone. So, and of course, there are all these areas of gray in between those two extremes. So the avoidant partner does feel, they do feel that connection, but it's almost like you have to imagine that sometimes, actually I had a conversation with someone about this recently, that sometimes your capacity for connection, for being in that sort of state of intimacy, someone may just have a volume that doesn't go as loud as yours. And so when you witness that your volume can go so much louder than somebody else's, and you interpret that as being rejected, or you interpret that as they must not love me, it's kind of a misinterpretation. You're sort of coming to an erroneous conclusion. And that comes from egocentric thinking, and that's a young wound, okay? Because it's not about you. You really have to take that in. It's not about you. It's that they have a certain volume. And no matter how much you try to beat yourself up for them not having the volume as loud as you do, it's not a comparative thing. It doesn't mean that they didn't love you. They may have loved you to the extent of their capacity. It's just that their capacity may not be your capacity. And maybe that feels like an abandonment because you don't feel like you want it to be. You want their capacity to be what your capacity is, but it may not be. And that's where we really start stepping into the relationship between egoic attachment and, let's call it, biological attachment, although there is an interrelationship between the two. So when you feel, when the primitive part of your brain is stimulated enough that it feels as if this specific person is necessary to my mental, emotional, and even on an unconscious level, physical survival, you are going to feel so upset when they don't match up to what it is that you want in relationship. And if you are attached to, not only physically attached to this specific person, but you are also attached to the idea that you can only get it from this person, and they're not matching up to what you need and want in your partnership. And if they can't meet it, if their volume's not as high, there's got to be something that you can do to yourself to somehow either make your circumference smaller so that it matches them, and make yourself okay with that. And that's what we do, incidentally, when we settle. Or you can accept that it may have nothing to do with you. It may have nothing to do with the size of your circumference, and it may just have everything to do with the size of theirs. And that's the fullest, arena in which they are able to express love. And that's their own journey and their own path. And then once you can accept that that is where they are, and that is the limitation of their emotional volume of what they can show up as in whatever point in time you may be, and you accept that perhaps you are feeling discomfort with that because yours has expanded beyond it, it doesn't mean that you don't love them. It doesn't mean that they don't love you. But this is kind of stepping into conditions of love kind of stuff. Because can you love someone whose volume isn't as high as yours and not put conditions on them? Incidentally, loving someone doesn't mean you commit yourself to them in a romantic partnership. And that's, I think, where we get confused. We think that if I love someone, then I have to give them all of me, and they have to give me all of them. And that's real love. That's true love. Our volumes have to be at the same level. And, I think that it's important to realize that these things are not static. Your volume could be here, theirs could be here. Maybe over time it goes like that, it goes like this. Maybe you spend some time on the same level, that these things are dynamic. They're not static states of being. But more often than not, you find someone who maybe stays within a certain range consistently enough that you feel like it's a better match. And if you are experiencing a sense of contrast in your relationship where you're feeling rejected because someone else's capacity for love may not be your capacity for love, there's a couple of things you may want to think about. And the first is my perception and experience of love, am I defining it as a certain measure of self-abandonment? Truly. You may not label it that way, but is it actually what you're doing? Is that actually the perception? Is that how you are practicing love? Is that defining how high your volume is set? Okay, well, they're not sacrificing all of this, right? I do all of this for love. Why don't they do that for me? Is that volume actually so loud that it's burning you out, that it's blowing out your circuits, in all honesty? And you're waiting for someone else to turn their volume up so they can fill you up because you've been burnt out. Okay, so you really want to try to examine your definitions for these things. Now, if your circumference, or the extent to which the thing that you are looking for, the depth of intimacy that you are looking for, has expanded to such a way that it may have moved beyond where your partner currently is, wants to be, and or is capable of, then that's where you have to start teasing out that the things that you want and need may not be with this partner. That's discernment. Doesn't mean you stop loving them necessarily. Doesn't mean they're any less worthy. Doesn't make them bad. Doesn't mean that they're trying to manipulate you or reject you or anything else. It just means that they may not be where you are at now. And you have decisions to make. And this is really speaking more to the open heart. But you know what? We could also say the same thing to the Rolling Stone, that you may be in a place where what you are available for requires that your partner take time with you, go slow with you, not expect so much, because that's going to allow you to kind of open up and bloom in the way that a flower responds to the sun, that gently warms them, doesn't want to crack you open like a nut. Now, oftentimes the Rolling Stone will experience an open heart as wanting to crack them open like a nut. They want it right away and they want it immediately. And the chemistry is, they feel the chemistry almost instantly. And why don't you? Okay. Because it takes time to cultivate those things. And so for a Rolling Stone, perhaps what the Rolling Stone needs is someone who's consistent and steady and doesn't need all of that right up front. Okay. So I think I will wrap up this question by saying that it's all from your perspective. It's important to consider what perspective you are coming from, to understand what volume you are operating at, to understand how you are defining what that volume means to you, what does love mean to you, how is it demonstrated, and to also ask yourself how much of self-sacrifice, how much of earning love, how much of my stories around that are actually at play here and are actually defining what I experience as abandonment. Okay. If someone just doesn't have a higher volume as you and they can't meet you where you're at, to accuse them of abandoning you or to feel abandoned by them then becomes a reliving of an old story. And that is actually useful information for you, because now it's up and it's in your face and it's having a conversation with you. And you're like, oh, there you are. there you are, old story. So there's more here. There's another chapter to explore. And typically beneath that story, there will be a younger version of you, a younger aspect of you that is pushing it up, because once you start to be in dialogue with it, then that younger aspect of you can start to express itself, can start to integrate itself into you. right? Can help you to let go of some of the pain that you experience of that feeling of being rejected because someone else can't meet you where you're at, and that egoic attachment to that they have to be the one to meet you, okay? Because that pain, you got to let it go. It in the sense that it has served you, and you can celebrate that, and then allow it to move through you, and to extract the essence of what will make you, to recognize what will make you happy, and then to extract the essence of what you will make you happy from it.